Good morning, everyone. Do you want to know, is your property a development site and how much it's worth? Stay tuned. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Minutes with myself, Michael Burgio. And this morning, we're going to be talking about development sites. I've never had so many owners contact us in the agency to discuss about their home or existing unit block and if it's a development site, and if it is, what's it worth, what can they do. A lot of these changes was stemmed with the state government implementing new laws around basically building heights where you can build units. They did it all across New South Wales. They picked out the top precincts. For example, on the northern beaches, you've got Brookvale, Manly, Dee Why, Mona Vale, these suburbs, and they made a distinct rule where they said, okay, for example, Mona Vale, you've got your Bungan Street, your CBD. We're increasing any houses 0 to 400 meters to the town centre. They're going to go up to 6 stories. And then you think of that as a circle around the centre. And then there's a bigger circle. If you're within 800 meters, we're going to allow 4 stories. So if you're watching this today and you've got a house in Mona Vale, Cromer or DY, and you're wondering, like, am I a development site? And you may not want to, you don't know who to call. You don't necessarily want to reach out to an agent and then they bombard you all the time thinking you're going to sell your property. You don't necessarily want to be calling like an architect. Are they your first call? You can't really call council. So what are your first steps if you're a homeowner out there and you want to know, is your property a development site? And then what could it be worth? So first step is there's a state government website, which I can send anyone the link. But basically, you type in your address and that will come up with the zoning. The zoning is very important because that will identify, can you build houses there? Can you build units there? Can you build warehouses, shops? What type of development can you do? And there's labels when it comes to each zoning section. So, for example, you've got R2, which is low to medium density, which is typically Beacon Hill, Allambie, where you see streets of houses after houses. That's commonly R2. Now, then you step into R3, and that's medium density, where you start to see blocks of units. They may only be 3 or 4 stories high, but it's unit block after unit block after unit block. Now, there are many other zonings, industrial, shop top, like business, mixed business, where you may see a shop and then apartments above, very common on Pittwater Road. But let's just keep it simple for today. And you've got a house, you were originally R2 zoning, and now you've looked at it and you're R3 zoning, which is great. So you've gone from the ability to have a house there to now you can do units. Does that mean you've hit the jackpot straight away? Some of the other key council controls that you need to know, because you may have the zoning, let's say R3 zoning, but what's your height limit? I know there's a property recently that I visited where the height limit used to be 8.5 meters. So let's just say 2 stories. And now that's gone to 6 stories. So that's a great positive sign that their home is getting closer to a development site and the end goal, selling it for big money or developing it themselves. So you've ticked the box of the zoning boundary units. You've ticked the box of the height limit, stories. Because just to go why that's important, over the years, especially in Lagoon Street, Narrabeen, you'll drive down Lagoon Street, Narrabeen, and you'll be like, unit block, house. Why hasn't everyone just sold to a developer? Why isn't everyone doing that? Now, what happened with Lagoon Street, Narrabeen, the house prices went up so high that it wasn't worth it to knock that house down to build only 2 stories of units. And this can be a common problem, especially on the northern beaches in the last 8 years, with house pricing going through the roof. So that's why it's important to have the difference of 2 stories to 6 stories. So you've ticked that box, the zoning and the stories. Now, there is another control which is very, very important, which is the floor space ratio, FSR, commonly in the industry. Now, what the FSR will tell you is how big that building can be on your block. Because just because you can do 6 stories doesn't mean you can do boundary to boundary and just do a full, like a full tower. There are controls which will affect how big that building can be. But just to keep it simple for now, you want to know how many meters equals how many levels, and then the FSR, which is how big the building can be. So let's say your home is on 1,000 square meter block and your FSR is 2 to 1. So what you need to know is 1,000 times 2 gives you 2,000 square meters. That's how big the building can be on your block. Now, a common rule of thumb is imagine your block is a rectangle, and then you need to know how big the new building can be within that rectangle. So big rectangle, and then the building envelope will be a small rectangle, which is typically 50% of the land size. So 1,000 square meter block divided by 2 gives you a 500 square meter floor plate. Now keep in mind, you can do 6 stories. So does that mean you can just go 500 times 6 and have 3,000 square meters? No, because your FSR caps you at 2,000 square meters. So even though you could do 6 stories and fit a 3,000 square meter building on your block, you're restrained to the 2,000 square meters, which means you can either just do a 4-story building, 500 square meters each level, or you may choose, well, actually, I'd rather have level 3 and 4 half the size and go up 6 floors, because if we get over level 4, we're going to have water views. So that's where it can come into working with an architect about the best way to design your property. But just to keep it simple now, so you can do the figures at home. Now, once you've got the building envelope, the maximum, that's called a GFA, gross floor area. So in this example, the building GFA is 2,000 square meters. But how do you know how many units that can build? Okay, a rule of thumb is, like at Novak, we've sold a lot of development sites. We're working with developers every day. So we get a good understanding of the ratios and the numbers they can achieve when they take a single house to a block of units. So when you want to work out your net saleable area from your GFA, use about 15%. And so you've got 2,000 square meters. What's that? 10% is 200, 20% is 4. So you've got 300 square meters you need to deduct. So you've got 1,700 square meters of potential unit area. You may ask, why the deduction? Because if you can imagine your building, not every square meterage is someone's unit. You've got bin areas, you've got lobbies, you've got lift shafts, you've got stairwells. So on a typical building of this size, that's the ratio there. So you've got your 2,000 square meters minus your 300 gives you a net saleable area, NSA, of 1,700 divided by 80. The reason I chose 80 is you've got your 1 bedrooms typically go from 50 to 60 square meters. 2 bedrooms, 70 to 90, 3 bedrooms, 100 square meters. Now, on council's website, there are strict rules on the smallest a 1 bedroom can be. There's not the largest. You could make a 200 square meter 1 bedroom, as far as I'm aware. So just for this calculations and keep it simple for you at home, you've got 1,700 divided by 80 would allow you to have 21 apartments. How amazing is that? You've gone from 1,000 square meter block with your house on it, council zoning's changed, and now you can potentially build 21 apartments on your block. That's great. But what is it worth? Because it's not as simple as looking online and seeing next door sold for 2 million, a house with a pool sold for 2.5. It can be quite complicated on distinguishing your house value to your development value. And that's very different sometimes. And that example I was saying in Lagoon Street, where the houses had gone up so much in price, it wasn't worth knocking down to build only 2 stories of units. What we call that is you've got your house price to a family who would buy that, and then you've got the development price, what it's worth to a developer. And sometimes that house price is 3 million and the development price for a developer is 2 million. And that's when you know, yes, you've got the zoning, but it's not feasible to be a development site. Now, back to the 1,000 square meter block example with your NSA of 1,700 square meters, your next step is working out the GR of the potential maximum building. What the GR is if you imagine one day that's a house there, next day you've got 21 units there, what would all of that be worth? That gets you your end figure. So let's say in a lot of areas, the rate per square meter is 25,000. So times 25,000 gets you to 42,500,000. Now, in the development world, developers, and when we're talking about properties, we're talking as a rate per square meter, which is very different to your secondhand residential market, where all you know is that unit's guiding $1 million, it's sold for X amount. You never really look at the rate per square meter, and your typical residential agent never ever talks about it. So this can be a little bit foreign, and sometimes can be a little bit difficult for you at home to find out what that rate is in your area. And it could be drastically different, where I've sold off the plan units where the rate is 20,000 a meter, but your secondhand units are selling at 10,000 a square meter. It can be a drastic difference, and knowing that figure can have dramatic price, can affect the price someone can pay for your land. So once you've got your GR for your building of 42.5 million, I like to call it your napkin maths, your sniff test. There's a million deductions and expenses when doing a development site, but there are really 2 key expenses that you need to know to see if it's feasible to stack up. And that is your land price and the build cost. And you can typically work this out quite quickly. And if the numbers don't stack up, then you know it's not feasible to go down that path. So let's go with, at the moment, typically a development is about $8,000 a square meter. Some higher areas, luxury, higher appliances, it can be up to 10 to 12,000 a square meter, especially with land, if the condition of the land. But for this example, we're going to go with $8,000 a square meter. If you remember just before, that you got to times your building rate of 8,000 by the GFA of the building. So 8,000 times 2,000 gets you to a build cost of $16 million. So at the moment, you've got your end price, 42.5 million. You've got a build cost of 16 million. Now we still need to work out 2 figures. What you want for your price, the land price, but sometimes it's more what the land is worth to a developer. It could be different to your price. But let's just, for example, we go with the land price. and the return on investments. Now, typically developers are going to be wanting 20 to 30% return on investment. We almost like to just break it up as 1/3 build cost, 1/3 land, 1/3 profit. So if you went back that step to 42.5 million, 42.5 divided by 3 gets you to say $14 million for the land. But let's just go through the calculation. So you got 42.5 million. We know what the build cost roughly is 16 million. That leaves $26 million left. And out of that 26 million, you need to buy the land and have the profit. So if you just go divide by 2, comes to 13.25. That was only $1 million off from just once you've got the GR figure divided by 3. Now, knowing this isn't now going out there and saying, I'm going to ask for $14 million for my block, that's what it's worth. You do that to know if it's feasible to go down this path for selling a development site. For this house example, let's say the house itself was only worth 2 million, and now rough figures on this calculation comes to 14 million. There's definitely a massive gap there and increase in value to go down this path, so you would continue. But for example, let's say your house was worth 20 million, and doing these development figures, it comes to 14 million. You go, not worth it, end of story. When developers knock on my door saying, oh, will you sell? You know it doesn't stack up. Now, just quickly, if you guys enjoy this video, I can do another video with more detail, because once you have your napkin maths, if the development is feasible, and in this example, the home was worth 2, you could build 21 apartments equaling 42 million GR minus your build cost, left you with 26 million divided by 2 for return on investment for the developer, because they've got to buy your land for 14 million, spend 16 million on the build. So they're spending 30 million to build it, and then a year or 2 years later, have the 42 and have their profit left over. The reason why that 14 million we've worked out is not the be all and end all of what your site is worth as a developer, is because back at the beginning of the video, we talked about the FSR and the GFA, the building area. Now, when council redo zonings or make any changes, they're just making blanket changes over a patch of land. They're not individually assessing that block and, for example, assessing that block to confirm, yes, they said you could get a 2,000 square meter building, but we're not going to allow it to go through. So what then happens, a developer will put an application into council or to the Land and Environmental Court saying, I've got a 1,000 square meter block, I've got 6 stories to work with, my FSR says I can do a 2,000 square meter building, here's my application, please approve. Now, a lot of the time the council will come back and look at your neighbours and say, oh, if you build 6 stories, next door will get no sunlight. We're not going to allow 6 stories. They may go, you're on a main road and in the future we want to widen the road. So instead of having a 6 metre setback, we want 10 metres. So instead of, for our example, that 500 square metre building plate, we're only going to allow 400 square metre building plate. So now you can only maximum fit 1,600 square metres building, even though the FSR said we could do 2,000. So with developments in council, you may hear all the time, oh, it took a year through council. A lot of that is the back and forth. Council and their planners say, we want this, and developers saying, all right, if I build it this way, can I get more square meterage? Long story short, there's a lot of back and forth. And sometimes the 2,000 square meters you thought you were going to get, you're now only getting 1,800 square meters, which will then change the figures of what they can pay for the land. So now 1,800 square meters, 1,800 times 0.3 is 40 divided by 2. So let's go 1,800 is our new GFA, not 2,000, minus the 15% for hallways, minus 270. So now our NSA, which was 1,700, is now 1,530. So let's just quickly do those calculations again. I'll wrap up. So we had a sale rate of 25,000 a square meter. 25,000 is 38 million. Remember before it was 42.5. Okay, now we've got to work out our build cost, 1,800 square meters times the 8,000 is a $14 million build cost. So we go 38,250,000 minus the 14,400 build cost. 38. All right, 38,250 minus 14,400. Beautiful. Now we've got 23 million divided by 2 for the return on investment to the land price. Now that's 11.9. Originally it was 14 million. Now it's dropped to 11.9 because of those controls. And a lot of the time, to get the exact price for your site, that's being offered a raw site with development. But that's enough for today. It's already gone for 22 minutes. I could literally go for another 20 minutes on this topic. I may do another one next week on once you have these figures and you do want to sell, what is your next step? Do you talk directly with the developers? Do you talk with the agent? And how do you know which agent to pick? It's a lot different compared to selling a house where you can go realistate.com. You've sold 10 houses similar. I'll go with you. But thank you very much. Stay tuned for another episode. Cheers.